And welcome to In Conversation with Keep Reading Kristen. I'm Kristen, and today I'm joined all the way from Australia by David Wuto, author of long-running urban fantasy lit RPG Metaworld Chronicles and the fascinating new series Metaworld HopeCore. The Metaworld Chronicles began in 2018 and grew from the lost yesteryears of tabletop campaigns into an enormous parallel Earth adventure. Then there's Metaworld HopeCore, a very different and wonderfully peculiar story about art, responsibility, and redemption. David, welcome to In Conversation. I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So I always begin with the challenge that makes authors question every creative decision they've ever made, and that is pitching your series in 5 words. So could you please pitch Metaworld HopeCore to us in only 5 words?
I would say art, hope, better world, optimism.
Love that. So let's go the story behind the story. You've described yourself as a purist hobbyist at heart. You have no Patreon, despite the distress that this causes, Selkie, and you continue to write because you purely enjoy it. Why has protecting writing as a hobby remained so important to you?
I think it's because I do work in the education field, where I do spend a lot of time trying and struggling to teach kids to appreciate literature. I saw an enormous decline over the years in terms of both my students' ability to read between the lines, as well as their ability to maintain concentration, to read anything that's long form. So for me, one of the reasons of sort of not going on Patreon and so forth is just part of it, of course, is the inherent desire to have as many people read the book as accessibly as possible, right? So with Chronicles, I've had basically people asking me, why you're not on Patreon, just do a Patreon, we'll give you coffee money or something. And I was like, it kind of, I feel like it inherently changes the relationship between reader and author a little bit. Because
Right.
when you do have patrons, you do promise people that you're going to release, chapters. It becomes less about, oh man, I can't wait to show you guys something I've written and I think it's incredible. And a part of it becomes, I owe my customers
Mm,
a product that must be delivered. And sometimes
yes.
the product is not ready, but you got to deliver it anyway, right? And that's kind of what it is. So by keeping it off Patreon, and of course, people's been showing me their patrons are saying you could be doing this. I was like, oh, one of these days, maybe in the near future, when I'm thinking about retirement, I'll be like, okay, you know what? Let's just finally do one. But if I do a
Right.
Patreon book, I think it'll be more with the meta. So, far less about
Right.
a off-meta optimism in theater, I suppose.
I love that. As an educator, I really love that.
Mm.
That making sure that all your readers have access to. That's really great. So you have a degree in literature. You work with language and literature with your professional life, and you've spent approximately 2 decades as a dungeon master. Which of those identities most influences the writer you are today? The literary scholar, the educator, or the DM?
I would say my high school self, because even in high school, because originally when I came to Australia, of course, I was a English secondary language student, of course. So um, I learned not naturally, I suppose, through my English teachers and so forth, but through just reading as much books as I could. And of course, I had friends who basically piled on me the need to read Lord of the Rings. And you can just imagine the sheer struggle of someone who is an English secondary language student being
Right.
given, when you're 13, it's like, oh, here's Lord of the Rings. This is the largest book you have ever seen in your life. Trust me, it's good. I'm like, okay. And I'm reading the book, right? And of course, as with most readers, but I guess this would be something even stranger for someone who's doing secondary language English. You get into the Tom Bombadil part, and you're just like, what in the world am I reading?
Yeah,
Right? And then you sort
exactly.
of got to push through it to the good bits, and you're like, okay, so there are good bits. They really should have got me to started with The Hobbit, of course. And
Yes.
then later on, I became a massive fan. So I didn't start off as classic literature. I became a classic fan of the original D&D writers. So we're talking about Tracy Hickman, Margaret Weiss, I think. Yeah, Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, um, R.A. Salvatore, right? The people who sort of did those early TSR Dungeons and Dragons novels. And then from that, I was like, you know what? I could do a D&D thing. So I started the
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons Club, and I actually kept the same group going for 20 years. And at one stage, and this is, very, very much a part of my passion for storytelling. And at one stage, my group, we managed to create an enormously successful D&D group, which was about 60 kids, about 6 or 7 DMs. We would take up the entire double floor of our local gaming store. We'd just invade the place and take over it for a day and a half. And at its peak, we actually had Coca-Cola truck in a pallet of
Oh,
soft drinks because, as D&D and soft
right.
drinks come hand in hand. You got the
Yeah.
caffeine and the sugar to keep rolling.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we just had our own little sort of convention going. And when that finally wrapped up, people got married, people had kids, people couldn't show up anymore. I was like, I had so much story I wanted to tell, but no outlet for it. And then, of course, I eventually, I think it was a few years after, I discovered Royal Road, and I'm like, this is a good chance to just take some of the
Right.
notes and just put it out there.
Put it out there. I love that. I have
Yeah.
students, I teach fourth grade, so they're 9 and 10, and I have
Mm,
students who play D&D, and
mm,
they absolutely love it. And um, we don't have a club like that at school. So that might be
mm.
something that we need to do because my son, I think, could run that. I love that outlet, the creative outlet for it. Um, that's pretty great. All right, so let's
Thank you.
talk about the heart of Metaworld HopeCore. The first one is when AI slop won. HopeCore begins in 2032 in a world that you call AI slop has essentially won. Human creativity has been overwhelmed by synthetic content, while intellectual property has been transformed into a system of control and exploitation. Sounds similar to our world. What made this the future you wanted Lana to confront?
I think that the source is not something a lot of people would expect, which is not certainly a literary one or an ideological one. It's actually American sitcoms.
Oh, really?
And right, you gotta imagine, you gotta imagine this sort of Asian kid, and in Australia, we don't get much of our own sitcoms. In fact, I'm pretty sure they low-key don't exist. So I voraciously consumed the sort of 90s, early 2000s American sitcoms. And we're talking everything from, Cheer to Friends to later on even stuff my wife likes to watch, like Queer Eye and etc.
Yeah,
And I loved it, right? It was awesome because I felt like that was such a hopeful America, right? There was just this
yeah,
vibe that everything
I
would
agree.
be all right at the end. It didn't matter how crazy the
Yeah,
situation was, how
yeah,
damaged these people were. People
yeah,
inherently, the moral arc inherently turned towards the good,
right.
and people who were damaged will sort of have their moments. They would recognize their problems and they would choose to do the right thing, right?
Yeah,
So I watched that growing up, like, all throughout my young adult years, I suppose. And when I was writing HopeCore, I'm like, that would be such a great America, both on a nostalgic level, but also
yeah,
I feel like it's something that's not really done in not just the lit
agreed.
RPG genre or progressive fantasy or even urban fantasy, because a lot of the books tend to veer towards like a more dystopian, it's like a more edgy, right?
Hmm.
And sort of like the hero is not humanity. The hero is the singular good person fighting against the tide of evil, as opposed
Right,
to the hero is someone who simply needs to bring out the humanity in others, and they'll do it for
right,
themselves. You don't have to be the one to cash the check.
right. So
Mm,
Lana isn't an innocent person in all of this, in this terrible machine. She actually helped build it and profit from it. then she's given another life and she's forced to generate positive causality. Why'd you choose to tell the story through someone complicit in the problem rather than from one of its original victims?
Part of it is the sheer technicality of it. So you needed to have both a system and a character that has essentially access to the vast amount of knowledge that AI inherently provides. And she is, of course, the peddler of the future AI conglomerates that, as we know, is literally chopping up books right now as we speak, right?
Yeah,
And of course, the greater irony, and this is a very ironic, I suppose, is that Google, which I use for all of my research throughout Metaworld Chronicles, and that was all cultural research, very, very in-depth stuff,
right.
is basically useless. So I actually need to rely on my pro-anthropic account to research the stuff to critique a
Yeah,
future anthropic company, right? So,
yeah, I get it.
I don't think, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
yes, I don't
totally,
think.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I totally get it. I totally understand. In this world, we're telling our kids, don't use AI for this, don't use AI for this. And then, I'm in my outlier account doing research on how to
Mm,
be, how do I make this part of my unit plan better? Like all of a sudden we have this switch where there AI is everywhere, right?
mm.
And how do you make it for the good and how do you not? Um,
Like I do
yeah,
believe, and I think I'll definitely write about this at HopeCore at some stage. Maybe we'll meet and outworld Bezos, and Epi can give him the nudge in the right direction.
yeah,
That I don't feel like readers of the book should read the book, especially the first few chapters, and go, "Oh, the author hates AI." This is an anti-AI book. Let's have that as a stance. I
right,
think AI is inherently beneficial to a lot of the human activities that we do, both in terms of productivity as well as access to knowledge.
right.
Once it stops hallucinating, we'll definitely love it more.
Yeah,
But some of the stuff I've found through AI is very, very interesting. Like, for example, I'm trying to find some examples of how Epi as a character could help. And it was very interesting because I found a previous American billionaire, and the name escapes me now, unfortunately. But basically, this was the guy who was responsible for building over 1,000 libraries in the US, as well as donating to museums and so forth, right? So he was the billionaire of his time, and
right.
his legacy was to allow normal people to access human body knowledge, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's an incredible thing to do with both your legacy and your money. And even though
yeah,
we don't remember his name now, we all benefit from what he had done with the wealth he had accumulated
right,
from, of course, business ventures. And I don't think anyone at that level of wealth would have been an amazingly moral person. You gotta make some decisions, right, to get to that
right.
level of wealth.
Yeah,
And then we look at, of course, the billionaires we have today. And they seem to be very much about imposing an ideological perspective upon the world, right? As
you're
opposed
right,
to sort of thinking, I have so much, how can I benefit the world and immortalize both myself
right.
and also leave an immortalized legacy? And I think
Yeah,
that's the direction that, at least on an ideological level, the book would want to veer towards. So I wouldn't say just from reading the first or two, the first few chapters, that the book is inherently against AI or even against capitalism or billionaires and so forth. Which
right,
which was, of course, a very interesting problem with Metaworld Chronicles, because the main character, Gwen, was a benign capitalist. So I
mhm,
would often have, I mean, it doesn't matter now, but I would often have review bombs throughout different parts of the book, which is in China. People, I have reviewers will be like, this is incredibly shallow book. It's glazing communism. You cannot possibly trust her. And then 2 volumes later, she's in Britain, and readers will be like, how can this book be glazing imperialism? this is just inherently immoral. And then we get to America, and then the scientists will be like, oh, I can't believe the book is glazing capitalism. Capitalism can't be inherently benign. And I'm just like, what I would love is to get these reviewers in a room so they could have this all-out debate
Yeah.
as to what kind of character Gwen really is.
That would be really fun. We should that would
That
be
would
a
be
really
good. That would
fun
be
thing
fun.
to do.
Mm.
To seek them out. That'd be a blast. I love that. Um, so whose life is it? She wakes up in another woman's body, right? Which immediately raises questions about identity, ownership, second chances. Like, how do you approach that moral complexity of a redemption story? Um, because she's occupying a life that's not really hers. Um, how do you tackle that?
We actually have a chapter that specifically deals with this on a philosophical level because I, for some strange reason, decided to do existentialism in university. And basically, I've decided, and this is, of course, a very shallow take. So, if anyone readers listening to this, please don't become angry with me. So the body she takes over is effectively a empty husk. So that's, in my very shallow interpretation, a philosophical zombie, someone who, of course, has a husk with no conscience. And then that takes us to the whole body and mind problem, which itself then gets into the whole I think, therefore I am, sort of argument.
Right.
And we never quite resolved this, but the character is very aware that she's in a borrowed body, that her time is limited, and this is why her literal lifeline is called Dasein, based on Heidegger's being and nothingness. And she sort of needs to spend karma, do good, in order to prolong the existence, not of her philosophical body, but of the continuation of her own consciousness within that body.
Right.
And that also becomes the narrative drive to continually seek out ways to do good. Because, as with a lot of lit RPG systems, not only is the system itself a gold finger, but
Hmm.
the characters would thrill the readers by exploiting a system that is already a cheating system, right? So it's sort
Right.
of like a cheat on top of a cheat. And
Right.
that sort of gamification really brings that thrill. And that basically doesn't happen in HopeCore. The system
Right.
is very punishing every time the old Lana comes up and she thinks about profitability, she thinks about vengeance, she
Right.
thinks about revenge. And often joke, after you've gone through about 1,500 pages of the book, the only casualty so far in 1,500 pages is two flower pots. Whereas, normally by chapter 20, we would
Yeah.
have mountains of goblin corpses,
Yes.
right? Because
Agreed.
because you need
Yep.
to max out your stats before you reach the prologue.
Right.
And that's kind of the big difference, I suppose.
Yeah. So the story also draws upon classical literature, popular music, movies, theater, lives of young artists, where many progression stories measure, like you said, advancement through strength and levels in combat. How do you turn the creativity itself into a satisfying form of progression? Because it truly is satisfying.
I think this infringes on a flirting with copyright situation. So in terms of, that's something that's very difficult. It's going to be a
Right.
tightrope, and I have done my best. And if we do publish the book on Kindle in the future, we will go through a legal process and just making sure that all the boxes are ticked. But effectively, for the books and the content that is within copyright, I essentially try to go around it through imagery, metaphors, analogies, as much literary aspects as possible to try and channel the original energy, nostalgia, feelings, and emotions that those texts would have evoked in the discerning reader who recognizes and says, "Wow, that is the feeling I felt when I originally heard that song or saw that film," or evoke curiosity in the unknowing reader so that they would Google it. So in
Yeah.
the web version, which is online, all the references are at the bottom of the chapter notes, and people could just click and go listen to the song and so forth. And it's very good because I love it when the readers say, "Oh, I built a whole listening list. I've got this whole playlist based on the stuff that I've read in this book. This is my new Spotify list." Um, the major song, which is the framework of the entire first arc, is In the Pines. And that is an absolutely phenomenal song because Nirvana, of course, made it almost a household name. It was actually
Right.
originally by Led Belly, but it's a far older song, which is from slavery era America. The lyrics themselves, the original lyrics, have no copyright because there's
Oh,
no author. It can't be accredited. It has multiple iterations throughout the years. And so I wanted to sort of take that song and apply it to these contemporary situations through the different characters throughout the novel. And that's kind of what I'm both free and not free to do in terms of making all these literary allusions.
right.
I think the most difficult thing to do, and I do hope my readers understand how it threads together, is, and you can, I should thank my lecturer for this, is threading the three tragedies. So we've got the Antigone, which is, your Greek antiquity. Then we've got Titus Andronicus, which is Shakespeare's slasher. And then we've got The Crucible, and which is, of course, the great American Arthur Miller's classic. And I've managed to thread them together to apply to Epi to talk about revenge, the consequences of revenge, and essentially characters driven by moral principle, by blind vengeance, and so forth.
Got it.
So so all of this, with the exception of Crucible, of course, is without copyright. So I could completely, really quote any
Right.
Shakespeare I like, and take any absolutely no problems.
Yeah.
Of course. And then we get to Arthur Miller, I'm like, well, we're just going to describe it.
Yeah. So HopeCore is a word that people increasingly use for art that insists on hope without pretending pain doesn't exist. What does HopeCore mean to you?
I think this is taking us back to the American sitcom. So to keep it as short as possible, I would say hope core to me means that people and the world inherently arcs towards the good. And
Yeah.
I do a lot of traveling, and as I said to one of my readers in the past, pretty much every location, other than America, I'm going there next year. Every location in Metaworld Chronicles, I've physically been there.
Hmm.
So multiple continents and so forth. And I've met, and this is one of the reasons I've decided to really set the book in America and try to emulate an American way of thinking, is that the Americans I've met abroad and Americans I've met on holidays, they are the most passionate, fun, and genuine people, I suppose, that I've basically met across all my travels. Right. I would say the other group of people that has that same vibe would be Australians.
Yeah.
Um, And yeah, so and that's always what I personally felt America was. Between the sitcoms and the people I've met. And we know America's going through some teething problems at the moment. And I
Yeah.
was yeah, and it was just like one of the inspirations. I'm like, man, I would love to see an America that sort of returns to that natural state, I suppose.
Me too. That's the
Mm,
childhood I grew up with. The
mm,
hopefulness of America.
mm,
As a Gen Xer, that's a
mm.
difficult thing for me right now. That lack of hope. So I love that this philosophy that we need to get back to that hopefulness and make that
Yeah.
difference. And I talk to it about with my students all the time. Like if we want to make a
Mm,
difference in the world, we have to have that hope that we can. Um, it's just super important. All right. So let's get into the fun five. These are quick
mm.
questions. You don't need to overthink them. Quick
Yep.
answers. Here we go. Which author from literary history would be the most dangerous dungeon master?
I would say Matt, of course. Since that, I actually have not read a lot of literary RPG, but I think Matt's books definitely would give me a run as a player character.
They're so scary.
Mm,
I love them, but yeah. If you could
mm.
preserve only one piece of popular music for the future, what would you choose?
Eleanor Rigby.
Such a good one. Which of your characters would produce the best movie?
Hopefully Epi, because we're certainly going there. Her first project, if I get to that part of the book, would be True Grit, which I believe is one of the best scripts I've ever seen.
Which of your characters should never be trusted with a film budget?
Probably Gwen. She will, she'll do insane things with it. I think if Gwen made a film, it would be Space Jam. It would make its
Yeah,
money back, and they haven't even started filming.
yeah. You've joked that professionally you're a cat. What character class does a professional cat take?
As a old gamer as well, I would say perhaps a merchant selling wares if you have coin.
Like Puss in Boots. That's what I think of. All right, the Would You Rather Meta World Edition. You must choose one. Explanations are welcome. Invoking obscure system language to escape the question is not welcome. Here's the first one. Would you rather
Mm.
attend a magical academy in Gwen's world or an art school governed by Lana's system?
If we're talking Australia, I would say Gwen's World.
Would you rather dungeon master a campaign for your entire cast or allow your entire cast to run a campaign for you?
I will run a campaign for my cast, I think.
That would be fun. Would you rather
Mm.
save the last surviving copy of a beloved novel, legendary album, or a classic film?
I would say Albert, because music is absolutely universal. Films and novels are far more subjective.
Uh, One final question. Across both Metaworld Chronicles and Metaworld HopeCore, your characters are given lives and worlds that are not quite what they expected. After years of writing these stories, what do you believe people owe the second chances they receive?
I do believe people definitely should receive second chances. And I think I fundamentally believe this just from a very strange article I've read years ago, and it's just stayed with me since. The article is basically this. I'll try and say it in 10 seconds. Drunk driver kills man's son, tries to atone for his sin, goes to help mow the man's lawn, speak with him. 25 years later, they are like father and son, but not forgiven.
Mm,
Mm. And that was just such an incredible thing. I just think about it now and then.
yeah. Well, David, thank you so much for joining me and taking us inside your world. Before we go, please tell everyone where they can find your work and what we should be watching for next.
Righto. So Metaworld HopeCore is currently free to read with no Patreon on Royal Road. Just search for it and help yourself. Metaworld Chronicles is up to volume 15, and it is on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited.
Nice. All right. Until next time, keep reading, keep creating, and I'll see you in the next story. Thanks for
Thank you,
joining me.
Kristen.